This is F.D. Recovery, where we interview addicts and alcoholics.
Our aim is that through this podcast, we might help you on your journey of recovery.
Thank you for listening. This is F.D. Recovery. My name is Frank, your host, and this portion of the podcast is the weekly intention. All right. Checking in with you guys. Last week was faith. Faith went pretty smooth with me. There was a lot of prayer during that, and that's where I found myself really honing in on the whole faith aspect and just repeating to myself, faith. But before I start diving into faith, our weekly intention is going to be higher power. But before that, let's go back to faith. I felt it was only right to follow up faith with higher power. So before we dive into higher power and some of those spiritual principles behind that, I was going to dig into the whole faith aspect from last week and how it worked in my week. I don't have too much on it, so it's not going to be a whole lot, at least on the faith part. The funny thing about faith, it just kind of, when you find yourself in it, it's just a whole lot of trusting, and there's a whole lot of calmness. I felt myself there a lot, and whenever I felt worried, I would just repeat my mantras as I love you, please forgive me, thank you. And I would just remind myself to have faith, it's going to all be okay. And I would repeat that stuff. That kind of gets me in the zone of where you can really indulge in the whole faith aspect. But yeah, it was... the funny thing with faith is, man, you don't have to be super religious, or you don't have to be a guru at anything, right? You can start where you're at, even like they say, a mustard seed, right? You don't have to be perfect at it. And that's what some of this stuff really just based down to is just getting in there and doing your best and get a crack at it, because that's the big portion for me is and understanding trust and faith are intertwined in a big way, right? But it takes a whole lot more imagination to take that leap of faith, and a whole lot more trust, because you don't have any evidence, right? So the only evidence you got is spiritual, and that's a little less tangible than stuff you can reach out and grab, right? So it's important to really exercise faith, right? The way faith works with me is just it ends up giving me this unshakable confidence in certain situations to where I don't got to worry about the details. And that's the big thing that I noticed this week is working in my life, and how I want to continue my sobriety and my clean time is just have that unshakable faith where no matter what comes my way, I understand that it's all just kind of the ebb and flow of life, and everything's just truly temporary. And as long as I just, if you can make it through the night, there 100% is a brighter day. And yes, I quoted Tupac right there. And so, like, the reality of finding this faith, even when you don't have a God, it can be tricky, right? But it is possible, right? Whether it's just faith in the people around you, because it really was faith. I put trust and faith in these people that I didn't really know much about, right? Trust kind of goes off evidence and things that you've kind of seen develop patterns and all that. But when you just meet people in the beginning of all this, you don't really know who anyone is. So it takes a whole lot of faith to get into this like lifestyle to begin with, because there's really a lot of unknown, right? And That's one thing I learned in this recovery is you got to have an open mind, right? And that kind of leads us into this whole higher power thing. I'm definitely not any kind of guru when it comes to any of this, right? But um, it's important. Well, it's imperative that you put some of these stuff to the test, right? Because yeah, it's easy to just completely block it out, but if you actually, so taking something that you're really just unsure of and you hear works for other people and like putting it to the test, right? And really doing it for months and months on end, going into the years, and it starts chipping away at this coldness in your heart, and right, and it starts opening you up a little bit, and you start realizing some of the biasness that you had before isn't really relevant for your growth, right? And that's kind of the stuff I kept circling back to. It's just like you can be right or you can be happy, open, and spiritual, right? And I know when on the track of trying to figure out the details and make sure everybody knows that I know, right? Then I'm circling in this whole right instead of trying to achieve not necessarily happiness because that ebbs and flows, but um, achieve some of these spiritual gifts, right? Because sometimes it's like it's kind of cliche to be like you could be right or happy, right? Because yes, the goal is to find happiness for sure, but it doesn't always come packaged like that. Sometimes you do this work and it comes back to you in a whole different light that helps chip away some of the darkness and helps you shed light on some of these things. And in the end, eventually, with a combination of a little tricks and um, how would you say it? Tricks and tips from people around you and suggestions that you could actually get on your path to a better life. And it's not just like, oh, I'm gonna have that overwhelming experience and see the light. It's more or less doing these micro decisions and micro choices that are collective throughout your recovery and just kind of chipping away at it. Rome wasn't built in a day, and when you start chipping away at this recovery thing and realizing it's going to take a little bit more effort um, than than things really. Because when you come in here, you just have at least I had an entitled mindset, thinking everything should be given to me, but that's just not quite the way it works. It works when you get down into the nitty gritty and you start doing the right thing, and you start being honest and you start being truthful and you start trusting people. Doors definitely open, and it does feel like you're just handed things after a while, but you have to be open and ready to receive, right? And that's what this faith does and this trust does. That's why we go over this and work these spiritual principles, because you don't necessarily have to have a God to work some of these spiritual principles. And then that's some of the value that we can lean on in here, because if you're out there and you have a God, you're very fortunate, but some people do not. And I was that person for many, many years. And so, so we just try to the relevance of because sometimes this someone could hear it and then the person could hear it and they have a god and it's, oh, this is irrelevant to me, right? But some people aren't fortunate enough to really dig this concept really easy, and it takes them a lot of years. I know it took me more than 4 years to really be open to the god concept, and that was just mostly a lot of my pride and ego, right? And I still struggle with it too. So it's not like I just got it figured out. That's far from the truth. So so leaning on this whole faith business is a tricky thing, because without going too far into it, because we did cover it in last, we like to do a recap on how it worked in our week and how we see, because when you work something, like whether it's faith, trust, and you just kind of focus on it, and then you put that intention out there, things show up in lessons based beyond that reality that you're trying to kind of project out there. So if you're projecting faith, it's going to show up and teach you lessons in that, and also unseen lessons, man, because I was like, okay, well, I'm starting to see that this facing is really allowing me to gain a lot more trust in my higher power, because I've seen the proof through this faith that, okay, I trusted something that I didn't necessarily believe was there, but then you can get a little bit more trust through that faith, and you're just like, wow, I I now I trust it based off of some of this stuff that I've seen happen through people, places, and and it only like affirms it, right? So it's playing off of each other, and that leading into higher power, right? We'll close off faith for now, and it'll intertwine because faith has a lot to do with higher power, at least in my recovery. So, but higher power. Let's see what Almighty Google has to say. Oh, okay. It's pretty basic. Higher power. Higher powers, blah, blah. A god or divine being. Okay, well, that's pretty straightforward. For some people, a higher power is a deity or a supernatural being. Others believe it to be a supreme being that is greater than other gods. For some, it is a single, all knowing God or a concept of the power of God. Don't believe in beings. They believe in the universe or nature, uh, or nature is a higher power, or they believe that universe or the nature is a higher power. I mean, that's all pretty relevant, man. Higher power can be understood as a concept representing something greater than oneself, as a force, um, a force or entity that uh, influences one's life and is not under their direct control. Wow, that's a good one. Not under their direct control. I think that's important, right? Because we like to get all at least I know I do, right? And we think we got everything under control. And that's why this higher power piece is such a big part. It's like we get overwhelmed easy. At least I know I do, right? So examples of higher power include God, the universe, nature, energy, and even the laws of science. In the context of the 12-step program, oh cool. A higher power can be anything a person that believes is adequate to help them achieve recovery, right? So it's not necessarily, we don't have to buy into any kind of religion, obviously it's an important factor that you find something similar to that, just so that you can create a religious practice for you. And well, I wouldn't say religious, but more of a ritual that you can kind of, because it's the practice that matters when you start doing this stuff, and you realize that it's the ritual. It's just like the routine, right? I got a certain workout routine. I got certain things I do because it keeps me fit, and it's the same concept of with this whole spirituality that I keep. I have a whole spirituality about it that I have to keep continuously doing and to keep me fit spiritually. I have to pray. I have to get in with that higher power, right? And I like the way it explains some of that, right? That nature, universe, energy, God. I just learned to use God for convenience because sometimes my brain will like to get ahead of myself, and I'll just like to complicate things. So if I can make it as simple as possible for me, then that's great, right? Because I don't like to spin my wheels. I spent too much time doing that already, that the any bandwidth I can save um, by just simplifying it, the better, right? So the higher power, right? I'll give you a little taste of my higher power, man. The way my higher power works in my life today, I connect to him, or it, as soon as I wake up. Constantly in prayer. I know some days I can do better, but I constantly connect through it. When I work out, I'm connected to my higher power. I just get back in that zone. I do it through breath work. I do it through stretching. There's a lot of day to day things that I do, and that keeps me in that, like, that higher state of consciousness and that flow, kind of that flow state, right? The more you can kind of alleviate fear, alleviate stress, wring the body out as far as physically with stretching and breath work, the more you can get closer to this higher power. Because when you're tense and you're stressed and you drink too much caffeine and you're overthinking, right? um you got things that show up in life that just put you in the wrong direction, trigger you. You got to have that safe space that you can kind of confide within yourself. And I think that's what that higher power concept does, is it helps you connect to that higher frequency that is that God consciousness. And if you can connect your body through breath and any form of activity as far as physically to wring out some of that stress in the muscles, because your mind communicates with your body. If your mind is distressed, your body is stressed. I promise you that, right? So if you can like get moving, hiking, going in nature, doing it safely, right? So a lot of people do that. They like to connect to nature, fishing, right? Just getting down to the roots and grounding, putting your feet in soil, right? A lot of people do that. I did that for a lot of my rehab stay, or my transitional house, back in 2016, my first go around. And it was really something, right? I would find little spots to, because they had a little garden out back, and I would put my feet in there and I would just pray, man. I didn't know what I was praying to. I just know that it was something other than myself and much more powerful, because I felt it, right? I closed my eyes and breathed, and I just know that the pulse of the universe is running through me, right? All the sounds, um, all the vibrations that are kind of going down in those meditative states, man. It's just, you're connected, man. There's something definitely grander. There's something so intelligent that my body knows what to do to keep myself alive without my interference, right? And when I do interfere, that's when some of the stress comes in. When I try to control things, when whether it be physically, mentally, when I start getting myself in the mix and start doing this obsessive compulsive nature that is in me, right? The sin, or the negative demons, whatever you want to call it, right? When I start exercising those parts of my being, um, I start feeling the backlash, right? So it's super important that there's a reason why I do this week to week, man, is because just this is pretty much talk therapy, right? If you think about some of these things we do, it's like this keeps me well. And I sure hope that it's helping somebody out there, because there's a lot to be said, and what's going on in our hearts and minds. If we aren't agent of change within ourselves, who will be, right? And God could help us all He wants, but if we're not going to open that door, right? God shows us the doors, and it's up for us to walk through it. Our higher power shows us the path. Anytime that I look back, right, and I had a really challenging time, it's because I didn't follow the path, right? Today, my path is super easy because I'm following my path. There's less resistance. Yes, I challenge myself constantly every day in the gym, in my life. I strive, and I'm always pushing myself, but I'm talking about when I'm on the path, everything clicks, right? Have you ever went to a place that you were never invited, you were never welcomed, right? Just that weird feeling. The door's locked, you got to knock, and they come in. They come answer the door, and it's not even a warm welcome. You could be at the dope house, whatever, man. The whole thing is sketched, right? It's just not the path, and that feeling. And I did it for years, and there's so many signs, whether me being busted in handcuffs, another 6 months, another 9 months, another 3 months, another year, whatever they did to me, and it was just pure resistance the whole time. And it was definitely, it was uh, it was character building, and it was necessary for my path where I'm at today. But I do believe that I could have, if I could have let God in a little bit sooner, that there could have been a lot of unnecessary, there was a lot of unnecessary pain, right? But hey, it's the path that I learned from and the path that I grew on, and but this is the kind of why we do it, so somebody else can hear this and hopefully they can learn from some of the lessons that I've went through, because that's my biggest hope for all this, right? And if you struggle with the higher power, that's totally okay, man. Um, you have a lot of people, you got a lot of school of thoughts out there that like to get real radical with things, and man, I just know that my higher power doesn't think like that. My higher power is not condemning. My higher power really, he's all the stuff that I never had when I was growing up. He was all the stuff that I never had when I was in those mindsets of suicide and even homicidal thoughts. Like he's all those things that contrasts all the deepest, darkest things in my negative self that I've had to really shed the light on. And those that's how best to describe my higher power, is just really just fine tuning the light and just letting that light in and letting God's message really come through, right, through myself and in my soul. Um, that's that's basically the goal for me with tuning into my higher power, and if that makes sense to you guys, and good, man, and if it helps you on this journey of recovery and your path to finding and connecting with your higher power, then that's great news. Um, you know, uh, I struggled with God, the whole God thing, for a very long time. I remember when we were young, I was such a rambunctious child, right? And we'd be in the back of the pews in a Catholic church, and I'd be cracking my brothers and sister up, and just acting a fool, right? And you can tell my mom and dad would just be pissed off because I was a little shit. But for the most part, I was okay. But it seemed like I was just always that class clown, rebellion type kid, right? And I was just a very frustrating child to be around, and I realize that now. But it all stemmed from things, right? The way that things played out really didn't make it easy on me as a child. So I've always had a complicated relationship with God, and whether it was trying to get shoved down my in my brain or down my throat as a young child through Catholic or Christian teachings. Um, I had a real rebellious side, so a lot of that didn't stick, right? So, getting to this point of spirituality and really just approaching this from a non-biased point of view, and just kind of simplifying it to, okay, I'm gonna call it God. It took me a few years to even get to that point, but understanding that it's all part of a process, right? A peeling of an onion. And I say that a lot because it's so true, right? Because you get to these different levels of understanding of your own consciousness, and and yeah, just because you reach a level doesn't mean everything just goes away. And you can still reach a different plateau in your personal and spiritual development, where you still react to things, you still struggle with stuff. It's not about being perfect, it's about learning what we can, and changing what we can, right? It goes back down to the spirit, the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? For many years, it's like that whole thing never made sense to me, but it's like, change what I can. Okay, like that's today what I'm trying to do, and also the wisdom to know the difference, right? Because I fought so much trying to change things that just were outside of my hula hoop, and just I had no real business even all like putting my hands in, and just I had no I shouldn't be messing with God's work, right? Because when it's somebody else's path, their free will, and their right to choose, all these things, man. I look back now on how much I really just meddled in people's personal lives because of a lot of the damage I did, a lot of the abuse I did to some of my relationships, whether it be romantic, whether it be friendships, whether it be work relations, things like that. I just was, I was just kind of wild and learning, we'll call it, right? Just wild and still trying to learn about myself and just really lost and didn't really know what I was trying to find. And getting down to this whole nitty gritty of spirituality and trying to connect with the higher power and um, getting to that point of reference where I'm just like, man, I'm just trying to do a little bit better and tune in and allow that light into my life and just so I can fine tune it, right, and get to a better place. Because in the end, um, when I can step into the service of others, or if I can step into the spirituality of my day to day practice, whether it's working out, whether it's connecting with God, whether it's connecting with nature, whatever it might be. I mean, this right here, this podcast is super spiritual for me. And I feel like I'm connecting with my higher power when I do this because it really keeps the whole spirituality alive within me and working on it weekly, right? And then just talking with other addicts and just trying to give back from what I took in so much from greedily and selfishly. So, and that's kind of like the brief overview of what my higher power is in my life, right? Just giving its service has a lot to do with service. Has a lot to do, and my biggest tools today is learning those assets about yourself and also liabilities, man. My ego can get out of hand if I don't check it, right, or if I don't allow God to check it, right, because it'll happen either way. I can do it willingly or I can do it against my will, and usually against my will I get humbled, man, and it can be pretty embarrassing because I know it's just a conversation between me and God, but there's sometimes where it speaks to other people, and there's just certain events that happen that make me really embarrassed because if I only just relinquished control and put my pride aside, I could have avoided some major hurt, whether it was in myself or just kind of a status game that we all kind of get lost into when it comes to ego, right? And just paying homage also to where you're at, man, because it's all a learning process. Because some of those hard lessons is just like, oh fuck, man, there I am, man. Thank you, God. Uh, Thank you for this another lesson that I had to break through those walls of pride and get down to the other side. And sometimes it's embarrassing because it's like pissing your pants, man. Everybody else can see it, but you got to deal with it, right? Because ain't nobody gonna clean the piss off my pants but myself, right? So um so so that's the whole concept for me of this higher power, is just trying to connect to something greater than myself and be part of a grander purpose. Because when I'm not in that place of a grander purpose, I find myself kicking the fucking meaningless bucket down the road, or the meaningless can of to nowhere. And it's just like I can't afford to live that way, because when my mind goes a little bit into the darkness, it likes to go there really fucking fast, and then it goes deep. So the whole the whole concept of just getting connected with your higher powers for me in my recovery is very crucial. I can't just willy nilly just do what the fuck I want, as much as I would love to, and just be a dirt bag and all this other shit. It just doesn't work out for me spiritually. It makes me feel sick, and the things that show up in my life today, what I used to thrive on, whether it be negativity or drama, where I used to like kind of live off of it, it really just it weighs me down in such a way where my conscience comes into play, and I start really just beating myself up. But when I do something bad, so um, that's kind of where my higher power comes in. It's kind of self-regulation, right? If you can tune into a higher power and a higher purpose and a higher calling, right? Then you could then you can kind of fine tune some of these things that are a little bit off frequency, because that's kind of how it works for me, man. There's been, it's like a flash bang grenade going off, and all you see is white, and all you hear is so it's fine tuning it back to reality. That's kind of like what it is. The war zone of addiction is once you're out of that shell shock, we'll call it, the PTSD of all these decisions we decided to do, and also that people done to us, and we have traumatic experiences, of course. But after the shell shock wears off, it's like we got to really put boots to the ground and take a therapeutic approach to some of these things that's gone on in our life, right? And that's a huge thing. And then you start incorporating a higher power into some of this psychology that we get help on, right? And you'd be surprised before long how fast you get healed, and how deep that can actually occur. And the things that you used to struggle with tremendously, now can kind of find a balanced, kind of a homeostasis, we'll call it, right? You used to be completely thrown off, but now it's like, man, I could handle this now, right? Situations that used to baffle us is a line that comes up in my head constantly. And this last week was just all about faith. I was just like, have faith, and I just kept reminding that in my brain. It's just like, have faith, like it's no big deal, have faith. So, and entering that whole higher power zone, I invite you guys to really think of this concept and try to embody it in any way you can, right? That's kind of what the third step's all about, right? Is and the second, where you're just willing to believe in a power greater than yourself can restore you to sanity. And that's, and then you take that third step. You give your will, you hand it over to to your best understanding of him or her or it, because the give you my will in my life, guide me in my recovery, and show me how to live. It's just like, man, and it's gonna be a tug of war. It's gonna be a tug of war for a long time, and I stay I stay in that tug of war. I find myself more evenly keeled now, and I stop pulling a lot more, but it does happen, right? So it's kind of like progress rather than perfection kind of mind state. It's like, man, this whole week I was able to not pull on my end, because when I give that will up and I pull it right back, what's happening is going back and forth, back and forth. So, but it's a little less pulling, when it boils down to it. Getting down to that. Sorry, my cats were going crazy in the background right there, having the zoomies. And so, bringing it back to that higher power is that tug of war kind of aspect. There's a lot less of it nowadays. There still is some, but it's definitely it's leveling out, right? So, follow us this week with the whole higher power concept, God, however you relate to it, nature, universe, um, and they, giving that control up. And if you don't have a sponsor, go ahead and get a sponsor, and you can start working these steps. You can see that higher power really start working in your life. Again, man, this is Frank from FD Recovery, and this week's weekly intention is higher power, or if you want to call it God. Um, yeah, just follow with us. And if you got any comments, drop it down below. Do a like, share, subscribe, all that. Share it with somebody that you think may be struggling with this topic, right? And I don't pretend to know everything about any of this. It's just I'm giving you my experience, and if that can help you, then good. Like I said, FD Recovery, Frank, and we're out with this weekly's intention. All right, peace. Thank you for tuning in to FD Recovery. A reminder, be kind to yourself on this journey of recovery. Also, call your sponsor. Get connected to local support groups. And for one day at a time, stay clean and sober.